Everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold. This is 5 Minutes with Ben, and I'm Ben. We're going to look at a king and pawn endgame puzzle, study theoretical position. And I would say this position is probably for players rated like 1350 to 1950, somewhere in there. I think if you're less than 1350 and you had to solve this on your own, it would be quite difficult. And I think if you're more than 1950, you should already know this. Some people who have watched a lot of king and pawn endgame lectures or have watched my lectures would already know how to play white here. Basically, there's a rule that I call the Feingold rule. The reason I call it that is I talk about it a lot, and I've never seen another name put to the rule, so I figure I'll name it after me, because it's not named after anybody, so I'll call it the Feingold rule. Feingold rule applies to king and pawn endgames that don't include a rook pawn, because those are notoriously drawn, and my rules don't apply to H and A pawns. So, assuming it's not an H or an A pawn, Feingold rule says if you have king and pawn versus king, and the person who's trying to win, the person with the pawn, has their king 2 squares in front of their pawn, then it's 100% a win unless the opponent plays king takes pawn. And then it's king against king. So what that means is if you have the white pieces, black is going to play king here, king takes pawn, the king is 2 squares in front of the pawn, so it's a win. So this puzzle is white to play and draw. And one thing that seems a bit confusing is the person who's trying to win often doesn't want their pawn very advanced. You would think, I want my pawn far up the board so I can promote it. But in fact, if we took the white pawn off the board, which we're going to do soon, and the black pawn was on F7, I'm sorry, C7, I'm getting confused, or C3, you would choose C7 because the king is 2 squares in front of the pawn, so that's a win. If the pawn's on C3, white puts their king in front of the pawn, and it's a draw. And so occasionally, when you're defending and you're trying not to lose, you want your opponent to move their pawn up past their king so their king can't get in front of it, which makes sense. And in this position, if black takes the pawn with the king, then black's king is going to be in front of the pawn, and black wins. And you might say, well, I can't stop that. So, okay, but you can stop it by hoping that black moves their pawn up instead, and you can make that happen. So white to play and draw, you only have one move, and that's the move E5. That's the only move that draws. And what you're doing is you're making black's pawn move up the board so that black's king can't get 2 squares in front of the pawn. Black takes. In this position, white has 5 legal moves, and one of them draws, and the other 4 lose. I think it's pretty obvious, like these moves are ridiculous. So, okay, no matter what your rating is. And this is called a distant opposition problem. So first we have to sacrifice our pawn so we can get the distant opposition. And in this position, the only drawing move is king C1. That's the distant opposition. And the idea is, no matter what black does, white is going to get the opposition. So if king B4, we We get the diagonal opposition. Our king's going to go to e3, and that's always a draw. If king c4, the only drawing move is king c2. That's the regular opposition. And the idea is, if black does this, then we follow them, and we're always moving our king in opposition to our opponent. Eventually they play here, and this is a book draw. And the most difficult move for white to face after getting the distant opposition is king to d5, because once again, white only has one move that draws, and you get the distant opposition again. And the only drawing move is king d1. And now, no matter what black does by moving their king up, we move our king same place, king d4, king d2, and king e4, king e2, and white has the opposition. So the only way to draw this starting position from our puzzle today is to play e5 and then king c1, getting the distant opposition. Now black can never get their king in front of the pawn by 2 squares at least. And if white makes a mistake and plays king c2, then black only has one winning move. Black gets the opposition. And once we get this position, unfortunately for white, it's white's turn to move. Black is going to go to one of these squares next move, depending on which one white lets them go. It's going to be one of them. Then black's going to have the king 2 squares in front of the pawn, and therefore black's winning. So hopefully, if you have positions like this and you're trying not to lose, you can figure out some kind of opposition or distant opposition. Don't let the opponent's king get too far in front of their pawn, and you can save half points and get full points and stuff. I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold. That was At Least 5 Minutes with Ben. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.